I'm Abby Meller, Managing Director of Moreover. I'm the host of Leading Lights, the podcast for women in the charity sector. Hi, Jayne.
Hi.
Thank you for joining me.
Oh, you're very welcome. It's lovely to be here.
Thank you. How are you today?
I'm good, thank you. Yeah, it's a lovely autumn day here in London.
So tell me, Jayne, a little bit about yourself.
So I'm Jayne Taylor. I'm the Chief Exec at the Elephant Group. And the Elephant Group is a charity that is there to support young people in state schools to get into top third universities and beyond.
Thank you. And we're going to talk a lot more about the Elephant Group and about your journey there. But first of all, take me right back. Can you tell me your earliest significant memory?
Well, when I sort of consider this sort of question, I always think I ought to say something sort of light-hearted. But actually, the first really significant thing that happened to us as a family was my brother becoming very, very ill. And I must have been around about 10. And I remember sitting in the living room and my mum had been, contacting the doctors on and going on at them. And we found that my brother just wasn't getting any better. He was always poorly. And I remember a doctor coming to our house and noticing, the first doctor to really notice that my brother was actually dying. And taking one look at him and thinking this boy needs to be in hospital. And all of a sudden our lives were upended. And it turned out he had leukemia. And we hadn't known. And I was just a young child. And I think at that point, I hadn't realised that life could just come in and sweep everything away and start all over again. I think that was the first really big memory that I ever had. And the first really big thing that had a major impact on my life and also on my worldview. There at sort of 10 years old, sat in that living room on that sort of dark evening when it happened. He did survive the cancer. He had bad odds, but he did it. And he also relapsed a few years later, was ill again, and survived again. So a really amazing story of survival. And he really should be here, talking to him. He's got a far more interesting life story than I have. But yeah, he was amazing. And that was the first thing really, that was probably my first really big memory. Before then, life just sort of pootled along, I think. Before that point.
Did you say you were 10?
10, yeah.
And your brother was?
He must have been 11 or 12.
So you're very close in age.
Yes, there's about 18 months between us, 18, 19 months between us, yeah.
And did you have other brothers and sisters?
No, just the two of us.
So it's just the two of you?
Yeah.
So really big,
significant impact. And it went on to have a profound impact on all our lives. It wasn't one of those things that sort of came and went. It sort of defined our lives for really about a decade.
And in what way do you think it defined your lives?
Well, I think it, when somebody's very ill, particularly, we were talking late 80s, early 90s here. So, there wasn't really the support for families with young people with cancer. My brother was in and out of hospital for years. He did get better. He was well for a few years and then relapsed and was very, very ill again. Had a big impact on my parents, both of whom became quite ill themselves from the stress, I think, and the trauma of what had happened. And we went from sort of being a normal little family to being sort of thrust into this sort of maelstrom of dealing with very serious illness and everything that goes along with it. So, yeah, I think it just sort of came to define my childhood completely. And I think he was fully out of danger by the time I was around about 18.
So most of your childhood from the age of 10 really until adulthood.
Yeah.
That was a big part of your life.
Yeah, very much so.
And who was Jayne then between 10 and 18? What were the characteristics? How would you describe yourself to me?
Probably, I probably went from being a bit of a dreamer, a bit of a floaty child, quiet, floaty, away with the fairies, they used to say about me, before I was 10. And then after that, I think I probably became extremely self-sufficient. Very fiercely independent. I was what they used to call a troubled teen, I think, probably by the time I got to teenage years. I had a shaved head and, did all the things that you're not supposed to do. I grew up in Manchester in the 90s. I thought it was great. But obviously, I think for my parents, it was a terrible worry. My brother was in hospital. I was out most of the time doing my own thing. But it also taught me a huge amount of resilience and independence and a sense that, you've got to sort of... life is going to throw things at you and you're going to have to just pick yourself up and keep going and keep going and keep going. Sort of grit, I think. Manchester grit, I think it probably taught me. I think that was very difficult years, I think, particularly those. And particularly educationally, I was very bright, but never really met my academic potential, I think, with just being slightly distracted by, difficult circumstances.
Yeah, life.
Yeah, absolutely.
And during that time, as an adult, who was an influence in your life?
Adults were influencers? I don't know. I don't think they were. I think I was profoundly disinterested in adults.
So was it anyone that was a role model to you, or anyone that you look back on and think, because of that adult in my life, they have played a role?
Maybe one or two. I think there was some friends of my parents who sort of took me under their wing a little bit. There was a couple who used to have us around for dinner, and they were vegetarians, which was very exotic. And I think they sort of talked to us like we were, like I was an adult rather than sort of a slightly annoying teenager. I was very into music, so I would go out and be out in the music scene in Manchester, and there used to be a lot of some really kind people there who would sort of look after me, make sure I was okay, and were very sweet to me. And I think there was one or two teachers who sort of noticed that I was probably a lot brighter than my bad behaviour, really, and sort of showed. And they definitely were there for me, and sort of pushing my advocating on my behalf, which is why I feel so passionately about what we do now. Really, is that they could see that I had potential, but I wasn't really meeting it with everything that was going on in my life. I was just too distracted. So yeah, I think that was a time of quite a lot of chaos, I think it's probably, but there's just a few people who can just sort of spot you and kind of see you in that chaos.
And from that chaos, a few decades down the line, you find yourself the chief exec of this fantastic charity. Yeah. Tell us what led you.
I don't know.
What are those key moments?
Yeah, so I think when I was 20, I met my husband. We've been married nearly 20 years. And I think when you meet a soulmate at that age, I genuinely think to be happily married after 20 years is a little bit like winning the lottery. So, I met him at 20, and all of a sudden my life became more stable. The chaos started to subside. There was somebody in my life who was steady and who saw me and all those sorts of things. And I think from that basis, if you have that kind of support at home, it starts to allow you to start taking steps forward. If your sort of baseline is a bit crumbly, it's very difficult to take steps. And again, this all feeds into why I do what I do. You want people to sort of hold space for you in that way to let you grow and develop. And I think having that person with me at that time and onwards has provided a really strong basis for us. I then went on to have children quite young. So out of step completely with other people in my sort of social circle. I mean, most of my friends didn't have children until they were in their 30s or even 40s. I was there at 25. And we had two children quite young. And I think that had a really massive impact on our lives. I don't think we really knew what we were. Does anybody know what they're doing? You certainly don't know what you're doing when you're 25. I mean, really, I look back on it now and think, what on earth were you doing? Why was that a good idea? Anyway, they turned out brilliantly. So, it's all worked out. But I think that at that point, that was like, that was I had to learn a lot about myself and grow up even more quickly, which led to a point probably in my 30s where I just thought, I can do stuff. I'm not just this sort of casualty and this troubled teen and this person who's struggling to kind of get through. I can do things. I've got skills. I can develop. And, you start to accept yourself a little bit more, I think, as you get older.
I think that's a really interesting thing about parenthood, because there's two very different things that happen. Once you, in my experience and speaking to my friends, when I first had my children, as they were babies and I was thinking about going back into work, I felt very vulnerable and very exposed. And that was a really difficult point. But as you say, as the children get older and you're looking after them and they're happy and all is well and you're pulling it off.
Yeah. You're getting away with it.
It does start to layer on this confidence, and whatever age, whether that's in your late 20s or for me, as a decade on from that, because I had a particular journey into parenthood. But that confidence that it builds is unlike any other confidence I had personally experienced growing up. And it's we're creating a happy home in our case, and the children are thriving and nurturing, and just that experience, because children are constantly evolving and changing and you're constantly adapting and you have this mirror up to yourself 24/7.
Oh, you really do, don't you?
Yes, you do. You shout, they shout.
Yeah.
You do something good, they do something good. But that's an interesting experience as a woman, to find more confident at a point where you might not expect to.
Yeah, and I think particularly after coming back in my late 20s from having 2 children and going back into the world of work and feeling completely out of step with everybody, experiencing quite an unhappy job share, trying to manage work and home, not feeling like I was getting the balance right, feeling like I stuffed my career by having children young, not feeling able to go for a promotion, didn't want to work full time. And I'd say things were a bit different then. I do think things have moved on since then. But I certainly didn't feel that having children was doing anything good for my work life. And I enjoyed being, mum and everything. But I was never one of those that would say, and there was a lot that would say, oh, if only I could just stay at home all the time. And, my mum was a stay-at-home mum. I've got nothing but respect for stay-at-home mums. I think it's really, really, really difficult. I always wanted to do more career-wise and felt quite stymied and frustrated at that time because I felt like, I can't do both well. I can't do anything well. In fact, most of the time I thought I'm not doing anything well. That was my overriding feeling in my early 30s, was doing everything really very badly. So it's quite challenging times, and then you sort of grow through that, don't you?
You do, and I think that's a common sentiment, isn't it? That first perhaps feeling quite exposed going back into the workforce, and then just feeling like I'm just juggling a lot of plates. And the way I describe it sometimes is I'm doing the best that I can do within the parameters, within the time limitations, within the 1,000 things in my head. This is the best I can offer to work, and this is the best I can offer as a parent. But there's so much, isn't there, as a working parent? It really is quite an experience.
Yes, it is. Yes, quite the experience.
But
yes,
with lots of positives too, like you say.
I think you learn so much. You just learn so much. And actually, I think there's some synergy between that and becoming a chief exec, in that every single one of your strengths will be utilised and every single one of your weaknesses will be amplified by the scrutiny.
Yeah, and you have a choice then, don't you? What do I do about it? Do I want to fix it? Do I want to improve? Do I want to learn how to manage this? Or are we just going to keep the status quo and have the same problems or challenges?
Absolutely. And recognising that, you're the one in control of that. And I remember seeing some behaviours in my kids that I thought, I think they come from me. I think there's some stuff here I'm not doing quite right, and I'm going to change that. I could be a little bit Versace and major, my children will be disciplined. They will do as they're I grew up in a very religious family, and, you did as you're told. I wasn't really, gentle parenting wasn't really a thing anyway in those days. But, I realised, okay, I think I need to allow more space for emotions and allow more space for challenge and argument, and not to be afraid of those things.
And that's also to do with accountability, isn't it? And that's the same with a leadership role.
Absolutely.
Your behaviour filters down, and you have to be accountable for that or not. But if you want things to improve, you take that accountability on and you say, okay, I have to look at myself a bit. So that's talking about the moments that have led you to chief exec of the Elephant Group. So you talked about parenthood.
And parenthood. The role. I did a master's degree in, I think I started in 2019. Just pre-pandemic. And I was doing that part-time while I worked full-time. Maybe it was 2018. Anyway, around that time, it took me a few years to do it part-time in a master's in leadership. And that was amazing. And I think I slayed a lot of my academic and educational demons at that point. I realised, you can totally do this. You're good at this. You're good at this stuff. You find it easy. You love it. And maybe you can stretch yourself a bit further. Maybe you can push yourself a bit harder. Look what you can do. And I remember going through a difficult time at work. We had the pandemic. We had a restructure, which I was running with a large department that was running at the time, and as well as doing my dissertation and all this academic stuff. And I had 2 kids, one of which had just turned into a teenager, and turned in. So everything was going on, and I managed it. I handled it. I got a distinction. I was like totally slayed my academic demons. I was like, yes, can do it.
Why? So you were working, is this when you were working at Sheffield?
Yeah, Sheffield Hallam. Yeah, that's
so tell me about you working, what was your roles there?
So by the time I left, I was the head of student recruitment and widening participation and access. And that basically covered all undergraduate and postgraduate recruitment. Home, did a lot, mostly home, but did some international, and also degree apprenticeship stuff, and also our work on the access participation plan, the access part of the access and participation plans. So I had 3 big teams, one which was recruitment, one which was schools and colleges liaison, and one which was WP and access. So that's where I had landed. I'd started off working in volunteer management. I'd done inquiry management. I'd been a manager in admissions. I'd been just worked on recruitment for a long time, worked on WP separately. So I'd kind of done a bit of everything, and then got to a point where I'd started to, when I could let the kid, when my second child started school, I started pushing them for promotion, and, didn't get it about 3 times. And, but didn't give up because I knew I could do it. I just had to keep going, kept going and eventually got promoted. And I think I got promoted something like 4 times in 5 years.
Wow.
At one point. So once I got going, I was all right.
It's incredible.
It took a while for me to get to that point where I could get going again.
And do you think that's because the children were in school? You could just change gears?
A bit of capacity. I could sort of, just a little bit of sleep. Yeah. Essentially.
Goes a long way.
Yeah. Do you know what? What a woman can do on 3, got a whole 4 hours last night, look what I can achieve. So, yeah.
So you're working in that role, and you've decided, I know what I need. Now I'm getting my sleep, and now I've had my promotions. I should take on a master's.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Why did you think at that point?
Well, I had academic demons to slay. This is, I didn't do very well in my first degree. I did that at the University of Sheffield. I was pretty traumatized. I was very unhappy. I was probably depressed, and I didn't really bother working very hard. Not because I was lazy. I just couldn't cope. I just didn't. None of it sort of made sense. And but I knew that I was quite academic, and I had been at school. I got very good exam results without really trying very hard. So I knew I was academic. I knew I could do it, but I had nothing to prove. I felt like I had something to prove to myself. More to myself than to anybody else. I don't think I think degree, no degree, it was to myself that it mattered. So I felt very disappointed in how I'd performed in my undergraduate degree. I wanted to learn. I feel like you learn, I feel like, gosh, if I could just have had 5 minutes to learn something, I could be great. I never felt like I had the time before then to learn anything or to really have the concentration or the focus. So having that opportunity to really focus on something it was for me. It was 100% for me. 100% for me. And I absolutely just loved it. I loved it. I would find myself in a flow, that flow state when I was doing academic work, and just realised it was definitely for me. And there was a bit of suggestion from some kind academics after, like, oh, you could take this research on to become a PhD, which I think I would have loved. But I knew that wasn't my path, and my husband did say that he might leave me if I did any more academic study, because I get a little bit hyper-focused on things. So he was just like, that's enough now. You've done it I think I did it for about 4 years, that master's degree, as well as working full time. It was every Sunday, it was most evenings.
It's a huge commitment, isn't it?
Yeah, particularly if you want to do it properly. You could probably do it with a lot less work if you weren't worried about what you were going to get. But yeah, I was determined I was going to get a distinction.
And you think that distinction helped secure the role of chief exec?
No, I don't think it had anything to do with it. I think.
What role did it play?
I think it just gave me the confidence to know I could do stuff.
Right.
I can do stuff. I can do things. I can achieve things. I can set my mind to something and do it. And, I can bring to bear all these skills and all this ability and do something. And I don't think I'd really felt like that for a long time. And I think when you work in a big organisation, everything that you do is part of something else. You're a small cog in a big machine, and I didn't really feel, I knew I was pretty good at my job. I don't think I would have got to where I had if I wasn't. But, you never really felt it was, what did you do? What was your role? It's quite hard to identify in a really big bureaucratic organisation. So doing that master's degree gave me that sense that you can do it, and gave me confidence, so that when I got to the point in the role that I was in, that I felt like, it's not really stretching me. I need to move on, and I had these skills that I should be utilising, and I didn't feel fully utilised. And that's no criticism, that when you are in a big bureaucratic organisation, you're in your lane.
Yes.
My bosses weren't going anywhere. That was totally fine. There wasn't any other roles that I was particularly interested in. I'd been there a long time. I'd been there nearly between 18 and 20 years by the time I'd left. I was ready for something new. But I think I'm also quite spontaneous. So I think I remember feeling a bit grumpy about work. And I'm one of those people that believes if you start to be one of those people that starts moaning in work, time to go. It's not fair. It's not fair on people around you. It's not fair on the people that you lead. It's not fair on your bosses. Ultimately, I could feel myself getting grumpy and a bit negative about things, and that sense of frustration with the way things were. And I just thought, okay, time to go. Just go now. And I just did.
So why the elephant group?
Well, I mean, that came up. So there'd been a couple of things which I'd seen sort of jobs-wise. I thought, interesting. When that came up, I actually had quite a strong reaction to it, which was, I know I could be really good for that organisation, which might sound a little bit arrogant, but it was just a sense inside, yeah, I've got the right skills to do that job. And I really felt, and I remember saying to my husband, like, that's my job. See that there? That's my job. I could work, I could do really good things for them.
And what were those skills?
So I felt that having almost 20 years of experience working in higher education, understanding the access landscape, understanding widening participation, working with young people, students sort of pre-university for a long time, working in that, gave me an understanding of the work that they were trying to achieve. And I think I felt that I could bring that to bear. We have a brilliant board. Lots of people on that board work in schools. I'd done some work with schools, but also I'd done a huge amount of work with universities and other universities and marginalised groups, working with a lot of care leavers, young adult carers, that type of thing. So I just felt like this was something that I could bring all that and the leadership, which I'd been doing as part of my job. I was leading quite a big team and I'd just done this master's degree. So I thought, I could bring all that to bear to do some good in the world.
So those are all the very tangible, expertise that you had. What were the other things that you could bring to this role that you saw in yourself?
Relentlessness. I genuinely think that I just don't think you can lead an organisation if you are not completely relentless, because it doesn't stop. You can't get off. You're on, and you've got to keep going. And I think that grit, I really started to identify some of that's those skills in me, that I was a lot tougher than I thought I was. And being tough doesn't mean I don't get upset or I don't feel things. I absolutely feel things really strongly, but I just knew that I had the grit and the determination to do something really, really well, and to be able to focus all my energies in one place in like a laser beam. I wanted to be able to do that.
And do you think that goes back to your childhood and young adulthood?
Being able to actually control something a bit more fundamentally was quite appealing, I think. I think that idea that I could help young people who perhaps were not having the easiest of time as well, to be inspired to meet their goals, to be the best versions of themselves. There was a time when, it was thought maybe I could go to Oxford or Cambridge, and that never happened for me. And I always felt like I was a bit of a disappointment, because I just couldn't get myself mentally well enough to be able to do what I needed to do. And no one really, it sounds like not poor me. People have had a lot worse time, but I certainly don't think that anybody could picked up on that throughout my educational career, and sort of went, actually we need to nurture this young person. They've got something, we can help them. So to be able to do that for the young people is an immense privilege, because I know what that feels like, and I don't think I ever kind of lost that feeling, what it feels like to be a teenager. And I absolutely love being around teenagers. I just think they're just the best. I just think they're great. So underrated, teenagers. And really maligned. And this next generation coming up, they're brilliant. They're absolutely brilliant. So the more time I spend with them, the more I just think they're great.
And now you've been in the role for 2 years.
Yeah.
What kind of a leader are you?
What kind of a leader am I? I think there's probably a little bit of a gap between the leader I am and the leader I want to be, because I think we're always learning and growing. I think the kind of leader I am, I'm probably quite relatively demanding, in that I have an expectation of quality. I believe very strongly in reputation, in quality, in doing things at the best of our abilities, which can manifest as, I'm both very probably happier in the strategy, but will also be very much in the detail when I need to be. I will remember everything, and that's because it just goes around in my head constantly. I think it's just every element of the organisation is sort of visualised I have a visual brain, so I see it all, and I just constantly work. It's just sort of constantly whirring away in my brain, and I think that's probably quite irritating for people at times. But I try to also be quite open to my mistakes. If I get things wrong, if I'm, if I get things wrong, I stick my, put my foot in it, or if I'm sometimes forget to be a human being, I try really hard to be the person who puts their hands up and say, I didn't get that right. I'm really sorry. Let's talk about how we can get this better next time. So try to be real. You talk about authentic leadership. I think there's something about being authentic, about being congruent, maybe more than authentic. But equally, I don't think everyone around me needs to know, have experience of every single one of my emotions. I don't think that's helpful. I don't think that's fair on your followership. some anxiety you just have to hold for your organisation. That's your role. But I just believe very, very strongly that we have a responsibility, and my responsibility is to the organisation first and foremost, and to our recipients, and getting it what we can get for them to be the best opportunities, the best chances, the best of everything. And I think that drive is a good thing. But I imagine for the people who are in the the people who are in the team, sometimes that might be a bit of a challenge.
And in these 2 years, what role has failure played? What have we learned from failure? Have we experienced
everything.
failure? Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Everything I've ever learned of any value has come from failing. I've failed millions of times. And every time I really do try to see it as a gift. And I think what happened in my last job is I got to a point where I was competent that there wasn't much space for failure anymore. And I stopped growing. And, it's very comfortable. I can see why people just get to a point where they think, I'll just do this now. Because everyone, you're not failing, you're getting everything right. You're completely inured from any kind of criticism or anything. And I got to the point where I was highly sensitive to any criticism because I did everything right. I worked so hard to get everything right. Well, now in the last 2 years, no chance. Getting it wrong constantly, joining a new sector, learning to work with a board, that takes a bit of stuff. You've got to learn how to communicate with the board. You've got to learn how to use your board. Your board got to get used to you. So a lot of stuff there. Joined an organisation which was brilliant, but in a startup mode. So coming in and seeing, there was a lot of organisational stuff that needed work on. I like things to be at a certain standard, so that was a huge amount of work. And we, sometimes to fail externally is the most painful thing. Because it's not as you want it to be, but you're not quite there yet to be able to solve it all. And that's really hard. That's outside of your control. And I think in those times you have to sort of sit back and go, okay, it's not all on me. It's to keep perspective, which is when I always go and speak to my brother. That's when you get perspective. He just reminds me of, of what's important in the world. And you sort of, okay, Jayne, calm down. It's all right. It's not that, you're okay. It's okay. So yeah, sometimes I can lose perspective. I've learned from failure that the most important thing you can do is to not shy away from it, not look at it. Look at the failure. Why did you fail? What caused the failure? What can you do differently next time? And some of these things are just outside your control, and you just have to let that go. It just happened. It's
pretty grown up though, isn't it? It's definitely adulting, isn't it?
So yeah, it's so hard, and it happens to me all the time, but actually what I'm enjoying about the process is the more I'm failing, actually the more I'm succeeding. And actually I've got a bit of an anecdote about this. I started to play roller derby briefly years ago. But over a decade ago now, I decided to join a roller derby team, which is basically a full contact sport on roller skates. Okay, it's like rugby on roller skates.
My brain is working. What is this?
It's amazing.
Okay,
I'm not going to go into. I could talk about it all day. I won't. I haven't played for about 7 years, so I'm way out of it. But anyway, what I learned when I played roller derby was the more I tried to roller skate well and play the game well, the more I fell over, the more I hurt myself, the quicker I was. And I remember starting at the same time as somebody else, and she would be very careful. She always looked very graceful. And I looked like a hot mess because I was literally throwing myself around. I was quite aggressive player. I was like going for it and trying to do these moves which were really hard and just falling on my face, crying. But within 6 months, I was on the A team, and she was still not even on the B team. And it made me realise actually you learn from you learn from falling on your face, don't you? There we go. That and roller derby taught me that.
It's a great story. I'm going to remember that one. That's brilliant. So we've talked about failure. On the flip side, what does achievement, what does success mean to you, especially at this point?
Well, I feel like the grown-up answer would be to say sort of forming some kind of balance between work and life, but that's not what I think at all. I know what the answer is supposed to be. If I was talking to my coach, I'd be like, yeah, totally all about balance. I mustn't think about work at the weekend. That's just not how I am. For me, achievement is whether we can move the dial on university access for our young people. I've worked on this for so long, and we're not, statistics are coming out just in the last few weeks that fewer young people on free school meals are getting into top universities. We are not doing enough, and we're not doing it. Well, what we are doing isn't quite working. Loads of people work in this field who do a brilliant job, and they're all completely dedicated. But achievement for me would to really feel like we're starting to move the dial on this this issue. I can't help it. That's what I want. I do think it's important to use the fire, not set yourself on fire. So use all the passion, all the energy, all the stuff that you have, but not set yourself on fire in the process. Don't become a sacrifice, because you're not any good to anyone if you're burnt out.
So, how hard is that though? How much, that one thought, that one aim that you've just described, how much of your headspace does that occupy?
97%.
How often are you thinking about it?
All the time.
Yeah.
It is. I kind of feel like I'm giving away my life secrets here. Like I find it very hard not to think. I mean, and not constantly about that one, but constantly thinking about how we can do things better, do things differently, and it's distracting. Which is why it's really important that I do spend time with my family. I'm very, very close to my husband. I have 2 teenage daughters who are the most perfect and wonderful children that you could possibly imagine. And I'd had a really bad week a couple of weeks ago, and I just felt really bruised and sort of almost still a bit broken-y, you know? And I finished work late on a Friday, and I went and sat in the living room with my family, and we all just watched something and hung out together and took the mickey out of each other like we do, good Northerners. And by the end of the weekend, I feel like I've been in a warm bath all weekend. Basically, the more time I spend with my family, the better I feel. Because they're just wonderful. So I think it's making sure I keep that balance and they keep me sane. And yeah, okay, so maybe it is about balance.
we have circled right round to balance.
I'm trying to make it about balance, but yeah, it is, and I don't want to be a martyr. It's not going to help anybody for me to be a martyr.
No. And is there anything else in that toolkit that we should know about?
Yes. So I obsessively read mountaineering books.
Okay, tell us about that.
So I've read about 6 mountaineering books this year, and I've probably listened to 3 or 4 books on Audible. I love mountaineering. I don't climb. I've never even been I've not even walked up Snowdon. I've never been up a mountain. I've never even seen a mountain, really. I live near the Peak District, but the thing about mountaineering is the risks that you have to take, the leadership that is required in the mountaineering expedition, the decisions you have to make, and the way you have to comport yourself under tremendous stress and lack of oxygen, particularly high altitude climbing, which is what I'm particularly interested in. So the big hills has a really calming effect on me when I read these books, and I feel like I learn so much about the world through the medium of mountaineering. And actually, one of my relatives was on the 1953 Everest expedition.
Wow.
So he was, his name was Charles Evans. He was my grandmother's cousin, and he went up first because he was actually one of the strongest climber. And he went up before Edmund Hillary and Tenzing Norgay. So he was on the big, they were doing a siege approach up this mountain, and he got within 100 metres of the summit, and his oxygen wasn't working properly, and he was feeling a little breathless and unwell. It's very high up there, not much oxygen. And he turned them around. And they'd already made this kind of the sort of summit below the summit, and he turned them around. They went back down, and they survived. And then about 3 days later, Edmund Hillary went up and sort of got it, you know. But I think what an amazing story of leadership that is, because his climbing partner was furious with him, never forgave him. His climbing partner, who then died a few years later climbing another mountain. You know, not to give in to ego, to summit fever, to seeing that the end is more important than the means. You know, that I think that's really profound. So I think I kind of completely, I revisit those themes a lot by reading mountaineering books. That was a very long answer. I'm very sorry.
No, I think it's a great metaphor. I think it's
so profound for me. It really is. And every time I start to lose perspective, I think about him. I think about the climbing Everest. I think about these people who've done these things and what it takes, and the parallels between that and the kind of work that we do.
I think that's why we're having these conversations, because we're looking for blueprints for people. And the truth is, you can find them in all walks of life, but also we all come from such different stories, you know. So we're trying to speak to as many people as possible who've done it in as many different ways as possible, so that when people hear stories, they can somehow perhaps see themselves in it. And if they can't, they can use it as a metaphor, as you've just said, and pull out the strands of, you know, and hopefully themes and patterns will emerge the more people we speak to, where we see, okay, well, this resilience or this grit or this confidence in trying something at whatever point in your life, like the masters, you know, these were the building blocks to the story that you're sharing now, how you became chief executive of the Elephant Group. Are you happy, Jayne?
Am I happy? Yeah. Oh, I've got everything. You know, I've got a job that allows me to use my skills, that is allowing me to learn and grow. I've got a tremendous family who, you know, who really are I couldn't ask. I mean, they're completely beyond what I deserve. You know, they're just amazing. And I think that, you know, I don't think it's easy. I think we've all got demons. And I think being a chief exec, it exposes fault lines in you as a human being. And I spend a lot of time thinking about those fault lines because I need to make sure that they don't become big crevasses. Because we've got to sort of, it's very exposing being a chief exec, I think, particularly of a small organisation. So yeah, that's hard. I'm not saying my life's easy all the time. It's probably easier than a lot of people's, I'm sure. But I am very happy, and I'm happy with the challenge. I like the challenge of all of it, really. Sometimes I want to get off for like 5 minutes, so like just get off the ride for a bit and just like sit in a corner. But you can't do that, can you? So you just have to keep going.
And you don't see that one prevailing objective.
Yeah.
That's manageable for you, like that it occupies so much headspace and that you think about it and come back to it. That's okay, is it, for you?
It's okay for me. If it wasn't that, I'd just be obsessed with something else. It'd just be filled with something less valuable, I think. I think it's a good thing to be putting my energies into.
And what next? What are your hopes for the next couple of years for yourself?
Well, I want to keep doing what I'm doing. I hope the board will allow me to keep going. I think I've been relatively successful. We've doubled the size of the partnership in the past 2 years. We've secured some great partnerships with some great schools, universities, industry partners, and you know, I just hope that I can keep serving the partnership the best way I can. We're a collaborative organisation where we're trying to solve problems together as an organisation. With our partnership. So I think I'd like to carry on doing that. I'm quite happy not knowing the future. I think there's something about being in that sort of liminal space where you're just sort of like, well, you know, I'm happy where I am for now, but I'm also open to what happens and trying to not be in control of that. There's an image of I try very hard to float down the river, not hang on to the banks. You know, just let the river take you and see see where you end up. I hope I can keep doing what I'm doing and using whatever skills I have to help other people. I think that's what a privilege. That's, I mean, massive privilege, that.
Absolutely. And thinking about the charity sector more widely,
Oof.
Difficult times.
Yeah, hard times.
What, in your opinion, what challenges does the sector face at the moment?
See, it's an interesting sector because you've got everything from very, very small organisations, very small local charities, all the way to these huge, you know, global charities. And so I think the challenges facing them, you know, are always going to be a bit different. Money is always an issue. I think obviously the announcements from the budget have going to be impacting. We've heard that in the news this week. A lot of charities worrying about money. I don't think that there's quite the flow of funding that perhaps there has been in the past. I mean, I've only been doing this for 2 years, so I don't know. I've only ever known the quite hard times. But I think we need to recognise the incredibly valuable contribution all our charities, from the very small to the very large, play in our society. And I think that really does need to be recognised. And I think trying to make sure that we are really good at telling our story. You know, really make sure. I can't tell you how many times I've spoken to people who say, you know, how are you measuring your impact? And, you know, and how are we measuring our impact? And that's really, really hard. It's hard to do well. It's hard to have the time to do it well. It's hard when you're especially a small organisation. But we need to keep that eye on the, you know, what are we doing? Are we meeting our aims? Can we really demonstrate that we are having an impact where we expect to be having an impact? So I think we have to kind of make sure that we're all, you know, doing what we can to demonstrate impact so that we can tell that story really positively to society, and that society can see how valuable our charity sector is. And I think sometimes there's a bit of bad press about charity world, which is such a shame, because I think this is just full of people just trying to do their best to serve their communities and to serve people. So I think we need to get better at telling our story. I think we need to make sure that we are diversifying our income streams. One of the things that we do is, I write educational programs. We don't rely very much on trusts and foundations. That's if anybody wants to give us any money, that's great. But we don't tend to fund ourselves that way. So finding different ways to bring in income as charities, using the skills that we've got within our charities. But yeah, I think those are probably they're probably the two that I can think of. Having only been here for 2 years, I don't know if I feel very... But what I will say is I'm on quite a lot of things like charity groups, charity CEO groups on Facebook and things like that. And what I see over and over again is burnout. Massive burnout of chief execs. Chief execs who are probably not getting paid very much money, chief execs who are not being necessarily treated very well by their boards, chief execs who are exhausted and unsupported. So I think there needs to be an understanding of how challenging it can be for people to be a chief exec in the charity sector, particularly if you're working, I think, in a small organisation without a great deal of support around you. And I know there's some great organisations that do support charities, but it's just been really sad actually to hear so many people telling their stories on these groups about just that they're fed up, they're done, they're broken, and they're leaving the charity sector because they've just been burnt out.
We don't want to lose talent. We absolutely do not want to lose the talent. Just to paint a picture of what your role entails, because we're the Elephant Group is a small charity.
Yeah, I do everything.
Tell us what that means.
Yeah, so I think everything. I do a lot of delivery, so I do a lot of talking to young people. So I do a lot of going into schools. I talk to head teachers. I talk to education leaders. I go and speak to the students themselves. I support that. I basically, we collaboratively write the programme with our schools. So we have an Elephant Access programme. I do a lot of writing of that programme. I write with other people in the organisation the Meta Method, which is our metacognition programme for students. So that's all about learning about how to use yourself, knowing your strengths and weaknesses, having that self-awareness and be able to use that, to utilise that as part of your learning in order to be a more effective learner. So knowing yourself, knowing your task and knowing your strategies is what we often talk about. So teaching young people all of that. So I do all of that. And then I'm also on there doing a bit of admin, got to do the admin, for a long time I was doing all the reconciling of every single transaction in the organisation. I still do the payroll, do all that's my weekend job. No, I'm joking. I've brought somebody in recently who does a lot more of that with me. But yeah, I write things. I lead the organisation, and I also try to generate all the partnerships. So that's all our partner schools, all our partner universities, and all our partner industry partners. So I'm trying to manage those relationships with the team. So I'm involved in everything, whilst also making sure that we are on the right track, that we're strategically going where we want to go, that our focus is right, that we've got enough money. Everything. I don't think there's anything that I wouldn't get involved in. I think the trick is knowing when to dive in and say I'm going to get involved in that, where I can use my skills, and when to pull out and go, right, that's it now, over to you. And I think particularly with it being a bit of a startup organisation, I've had to be a lot more involved in things like filing. Where do we file everything? What are we using? What's the IT system like? All that type of stuff. Than perhaps I would want to be. And now I'm trying to pull myself back out of that, much more into the strategic. How can we make a difference from a more strategic perspective, making sure we're going in the right direction and making sure our impact, our evaluation, our theory of change, all of that type of thing is really spot on, and we're demonstrating our value to our partners.
2 years is a good chunk of time, isn't it? You've kind of got under the skin of it. You've understood it. You can see where you can make improvements.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
It's nice, isn't it?
It's nice. My husband, when I took this job, my husband very presciently said to me, "You're going to have 2 years of hell, and then I bet it'll get better."
There you go.
And I was like, It's annoying when he's right.
Yeah.
It happens far more often than I'd like to admit. He got that one right. And it was really tough. It was really tough the first couple of years, because I wouldn't say that administrative skills and all that type, there weren't things I was particularly used to using.
Yeah.
I don't think I'd written my own PowerPoint in about 10 years, and all of a sudden, when you're a charity chief executive of a small organisation, you've got to get stuck in. You've got to roll your sleeves up and do everything, that was a bit of a challenge.
With that in mind, so our closing tradition is that we ask our chief executives what is the one piece of advice they would pass on to somebody working at any level within a charity. What's the one tip they would give?
You have to indulge me to go back to the basic tenets of philosophy here and say, know yourself. If you know who you are, you know what you can bring to an organisation. If you know what your faults are, what your limitations are, you can mitigate against those. And if you are not self-aware, you are really going to find yourself in a world of problems. You will cross your boundaries. You will not make best use of your skills. You will lack confidence. So I think having that sense of knowing who you are and really being honest about who you are is the best thing that anyone can do at any point in their lives.
How does one do that though? Because we've said, through the passage of time and experience, you get to know yourself.
Through your mistakes. You've got to look at them. You've got to look at your successes and say, what was I responsible for in that success? What was I actually responsible for? The old poem, if you can meet with triumph and disaster and treat those two impostors just the same. There is a bit of truth in that you've got to look at success and failure and say, what was my contribution to both of those things? And what was just the world and what was just happening? By questioning those sorts of things, by having a learning mindset, a continual learning mindset, you will come to understand yourself better, using your questioning habits, thinking about, what was my contribution to this? Where did I play a role? And really looking at yourself clearly. That's how we get to know ourselves. And then it becomes a lot less scary to make mistakes because you understand the kind of patina of your personality and your kind of strengths and weaknesses, and nothing can surprise you anymore. It's not like if anyone said to me, Jayne, you talk quite a lot, I wouldn't be like, oh my gosh, you're kidding, right? Yeah, as far as I know, yeah. That's part of my personality, So once you know yourself, you're less hurt by those sort of criticism, you're less stung by criticism, I think.
And is that the same advice you give your two teenage daughters?
Oh yeah, be unapologetically yourself. I've got one daughter who is hugely sociable and vivacious, and another daughter who is quite spiky. And I treat both of those qualities as being as useful and as wonderful as they both are.
And how do you do that? How do you celebrate that with them?
By being, I suppose I'm quite blunt. I do remember saying to I shouldn't really say this, but my younger daughter saying to her, you might not be as popular as your sister because you're quite blunt and you can be quite spiky and you don't people please and all that type of thing. And she was just like, oh, really? And I was like, yeah, but that's okay. That's great. What a great talent you have of not feeling like you have to please everybody around you. That's a brilliant thing. Use that, accept it in yourself, value it. It will be becoming incredibly handy as you get older. And then for my daughter, who's incredibly sociable and people just, she's so easy with people. What a great skill to make people feel so comfortable. What a great skill to make people feel so easy in your presence. They're equal in my view. And I think we just have to celebrate them. We have to deprogram ourselves as women a little bit on that. I think we have been a bit, well, I don't know, a lot of women are programmed to be good girls rather than wild women. But, I think it's sort of, recognising the strength in a lot of these personality traits. It's just some are maybe more valued by society and for more genders than others, perhaps. But that's a whole other hour.
It is a whole nother hour and we're very close to the end. But there's two thoughts I've had as you're talking. One, you're a mum of two teenage girls and you're the chief exec, which as a woman, is there therefore a responsibility to talk about your experience or to advocate in any way or not?
As a woman?
Yeah, as a woman. Do you feel...
100%. We're not there yet. Yeah. We are not there yet. And I want to show my kids, and it's not about saying, you must be successful, you must put your... No, follow your path, whatever that path is. It's difficult. People are always going to be against you. You're never going to make everybody happy. You're never going to make everybody happy. You're always going to upset somebody. You're not for everyone. And I think that's just so important. You're never going to be for everybody. Just be for yourself. Just be true and congruent with yourself. And as women, we have to do that as much as men. And just be yourself. I remember someone saying to me, Jayne, you're a little, I think perhaps you could be a little much. You could be a little bit much. And I said, well, in that case, feel free to go find less. And I think that's the approach I want them to feel in life. If this isn't for you, I'm not for everybody. And that's okay. You do it your way, whatever that means, whether that's being a stay-at-home mum or whether it's going to push forward in your career, if that's being a bit of a spiky person who challenges things, or whether it's being somebody who makes life social situations incredibly easy, that's fine. But do it congruently to yourself.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And then our final thought, and it relates to, as we were wrapping up around the top tips for women in charities, I was also thinking, what was that thing that nobody told you that you wish they had? Thinking about your entire journey to this role.
Ooh, that's a really hard one. That you just have to keep going, and it's okay. Just keep going. Just keep putting one slow foot in front of the other slow foot. It doesn't matter if you're not going like the clappers. Just keep going. I think someone just sat me down and said, Jayne, there's going to be times you're just going to feel awful, but just keep going. Just get up, keep going. And I think sometimes that's all we need to say to each other, really, is just, you can't make it better. You can't make it easy. It's not going to feel great, but just keep going.
Thank you.
Okay.